Welcome to Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights. We're diving deep today into something super important for anyone thinking about investing in Vietnam.
Hmm.
We're talking about the legal responsibilities of board members.
Yeah, definitely a key area to understand. It's like, before you hop on a ship, you'd want to know the captain's got the right experience, right?
Right.
Same idea here. You got to be confident in the people running the companies you're putting your money into.
That's a perfect analogy. And that's where we come in. We're Harley Miller, and we're here to guide you through this. We're basing our deep dive today on an article that our firm published, which lays out all the essentials. So let's start with the basics. Who are these board members we're talking about, and what exactly do they do in a Vietnamese company?
Great question. So these board members, they make up what's called the board of directors. You can basically think of them as the top decision makers, the folks steering the ship. They set the company's strategy, make sure operations are running smoothly, and most importantly, they're legally obligated to act in the best interests of the company and its shareholders.
Okay, so they're responsible for the big picture stuff. Got it. But how does Vietnam's legal system actually make sure they're doing all that?
Well, it's not just about ethical leadership, it's all laid out in the law.
Ah, okay.
The Enterprise Law of 2020, that's the main one here in Vietnam, it basically sets the ground rules for how companies are governed and what responsibilities come with being in charge.
So there are legal consequences if they don't play by the rules. It's not just about doing what's morally right.
You got it. And it goes beyond just the enterprise law. There's also the securities law and a whole bunch of other regulations that get into the specifics. These laws are there to protect investors like you and make sure everything's transparent.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. What happens when board members don't do what they're supposed to? What are the consequences?
In Vietnam, board members can face three main types of liability: civil, administrative, and criminal.
Whoa, three. Okay, let's break those down one by one. What does civil liability mean exactly?
Sure. So imagine a situation where, let's say, a board member makes a decision that ends up costing the company a ton of money.
Ouch.
Yeah. The shareholders, the people who own a part of the company, they could actually sue the board to try and get those losses back.
So it's about holding them financially accountable for bad decisions, decisions that impact the company's performance.
Exactly. Now, administrative responsibility, that's a bit different. This one focuses more on violations related to information disclosure and corporate governance.
So like, if a board is being sneaky and hiding important info from shareholders, they could get in trouble.
Exactly. Transparency is super important for investors to make smart decisions. These regulations help ensure that companies aren't trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. And then there's criminal liability, and this is where things get really serious.
Okay, let's talk about that. What kind of actions would land a board member in hot water, criminally speaking, here in Vietnam?
We're talking about stuff like cooking the books, giving false information in reports, manipulating stock prices, or even tax evasion. If they're caught doing things like that, they could be facing some hefty fines or even jail time.
That does sound serious. We're not talking about just a slap on the wrist here.
Not at all. The consequences can be pretty significant, and it really highlights just how crucial it is to understand these legal responsibilities, especially if you're thinking about investing in a Vietnamese company.
Right, you definitely want to feel confident that the people in charge are playing by the rules. Can you give us an example of how this might actually play out in the real world?
Absolutely. Let's say a company's gearing up to go public, offering shares of its stock to the public for the first time. That's what we call an IPO, initial public offering. It's a big deal. Investors want to know everything they can about the company before they put their money in.
Makes sense. Got to have the full picture before you make such a big decision.
Exactly. But sometimes board members might be tempted to embellish things a little bit. Maybe they want to make the company's financials look a bit better than they really are, or downplay some of the risks involved to attract more investors.
So they might try to paint a rosier picture than reality.
Yeah, exactly. And if those misrepresentations are discovered, the board members involved could face some serious consequences, both from regulators and from investors who feel like they were misled.
It's a big breach of trust, really.
Absolutely. And it can do a lot of damage to the company's reputation as well. Another pretty common issue we see is conflicts of interest.
Okay, I've heard that term before.
Mm.
But what does that actually look like in this context? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Imagine you have a board member who also owns their own separate business, let's say a construction company.
Okay.
And then that construction company happens to land a big contract from the company that the board member sits on.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That's a conflict of interest because now their personal business interests might be influencing their decisions as a board member.
Right. So instead of acting in the best interests of the company they're on the board of, they might be tempted to do something that would benefit their own company.
Precisely. It's a direct violation of their legal and ethical duty to put the company they represent first.
Are there safeguards in place to try and prevent these conflicts of interest from happening in the first place?
Yes, Vietnamese law does require companies to have policies in place to manage these situations. Board members are required to disclose any potential conflicts of interest and recuse themselves from voting on matters where their personal interests are at stake.
So transparency is key here.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, this is all pretty complex stuff. It feels like you need a law degree to really wrap your head around it all. What can investors who aren't legal experts do to protect themselves?
That's where due diligence comes in.
I hear that term all the time.
Mm.
But what does that actually mean for someone looking to invest in a company in Vietnam?
It basically means doing your homework, researching the company's leadership, their track record, checking for any red flags. Basically, don't just jump in blindly because you like the company's product or someone gave you a hot tip. You got to look under the hood, so to speak.
So how do you actually go about doing that? Where do you even start?
A good starting point is to look into the backgrounds of the board members themselves. Are they experienced? Do they have a good reputation in the industry? Have they been involved in any legal issues in the past? A lot of this information you can find on company websites, financial news sources, public records, that sort of thing.
So it's about taking the time to research and really understand who's running the show before you invest your money.
Exactly. And this is where having a good legal advisor can be really valuable. Someone who understands all the ins and outs of Vietnamese corporate law and can help you interpret all this information. That's something we specialize in at Harley Miller.
Yeah, it sounds like having that legal expertise on your side could make a world of difference, especially in a new and complex market like Vietnam.
Absolutely. We can help investors assess the risks and make sure their interests are protected.
That peace of mind is priceless, for sure. Before we wrap up this section, is there anything else that's crucial for investors to consider when they're evaluating a company's board of directors?
Yeah, another important thing to consider is diversity. You want a board that represents a variety of backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences.
I can see why that's important. You don't want everyone thinking exactly the same way, right?
Exactly. If a board is too homogenous, too similar, they might miss important things or fall into that groupthink trap. A diverse board is more likely to challenge assumptions, consider different points of view, and ultimately make better, more informed decisions.
So when you're doing your research, it's not just about looking at individual board members' resumes. It's also about looking at the overall makeup of the board, right? Does it reflect a real diversity of thought and expertise?
That's an excellent point.
So we've covered the legal framework, real-world examples, practical tips for investors. What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember when it comes to board member responsibilities here in Vietnam?
I think the most important thing to remember is this: knowledge is power. By understanding the legal framework, conducting thorough due diligence, and seeking expert advice when you need it, you can feel much more confident about your investment decisions.
Don't be afraid to ask questions and really dig deep before you invest your hard-earned money.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've covered a ton of ground today, everything from the legal frameworks to real-world examples and those practical tips for investors. But as we wrap up our deep dive into board member responsibilities, let's zoom out for a minute and think about the bigger picture here, the Vietnamese business landscape as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. This isn't just about protecting individual investors, right? It's about creating a healthy and transparent business environment in Vietnam, one that's going to attract foreign investment and encourage sustainable growth for everyone.
So it's about building trust and confidence in the Vietnamese market as a whole.
Exactly. When investors see strong laws in place that hold board members accountable and really protect their interests, they're much more likely to invest and contribute to Vietnam's overall economic development.
And that's a win-win for everyone: businesses, employees, the entire economy.
Precisely. And while we've been focusing on the individual investor today, it's crucial to remember that this issue has ripple effects that go way beyond that. It really impacts Vietnam's economic future as a whole.
It's like you're creating a system where everyone knows the rules of the game and the consequences if those rules are broken.
That's a great way to put it. Fostering that culture of accountability and transparency ultimately benefits everyone involved, all stakeholders.
Well said. So, for our listeners who are interested in digging deeper into this topic and understanding how it all connects to their own investment decisions, where can they turn for some expert guidance?
Well, Harley Miller, of course. Our team of legal professionals here, we live and breathe Vietnamese corporate law. We can provide tailored advice to help you navigate this complex landscape and make sure you're protected.
We're here to help you make those informed investment decisions and protect your interests in Vietnam's dynamic and exciting business environment.
Don't hesitate to reach out. We're always happy to chat, discuss your specific needs, and how we can best support you.
Perfect. To wrap things up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to walk away with today when it comes to board member responsibilities in Vietnam?
I think the message to remember is knowledge is power. The more you know, the better equipped you are. By understanding that legal framework, conducting thorough due diligence, and of course seeking expert advice when you need it, investors can confidently navigate the Vietnamese market and take advantage of all the amazing opportunities that it has to offer.
Excellent advice. On that note, we'll wrap up this episode of Vietnam Legal and Investment Insights. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and empowering.
Until next time.